I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. I'm here with Jamie, and we have a guest today. Her name is Haley Yeager. We're excited to talk to Haley because she has a beautiful story. And a lot of times when we interview people, they do have a beautiful story and they have a passionate place for wanting to be involved in the same thing Jamie and I are involved in, which is empowering women to be the genius of their hormones. But I'm excited. We met recently, Haley and I did at a conference for Facts About Fertility. And so Haley, first and foremost, what is the way that you think women can really start to understand what is going on in their bodies? And, how did that happen to you?
Well, Teresa and Jamie, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And as you said, I have a story and I think it's a very compelling one. and I hope that by the end of it sparks just some hope for your listeners on if they are really struggling with any unwanted symptoms and in just the reproductive space, fertility space, that they know that there is hope there and that they can seek healing. So I think the best thing that a woman or that a couple can do, no matter what their symptoms are, if it's infertility or if she's experiencing pain or hormonal, just mood swings all the time and just unwanted symptoms that are simply unwanted. I think the best thing that she can start is by learning to chart her cycle. I think hands down, that is the best starting point. And the amount of things that you can do from there is phenomenal. And there's been so much research done, as both of you know, to really help women, starting with this fertility chart. If she learns how to chart her cycle, we can see so much just on a fertility chart alone on how her hormones are moving, if there's any sort of hormonal imbalance. And that really helps with true diagnosis, which follows then to good treatment. So that is exactly what happened to me. When I was 16, I was experiencing still just erratic cycles, never really knew when my period was coming. And at 16, I was like, okay, probably should maybe do something about this, just go see if there's anything going on. And I also have family history of infertility. And so I knew that this was probably a genetic thing. Let's just take a look and see what's going on. So I went to just my regular primary care doctor. And what happens when a 16-year-old girl goes to her doctor and says, I have irregular periods? Well, she gets put on the pill, right? And so that's exactly what happened. I was put on the pill, but it immediately made me super moody. And I remember, I don't remember the brands that I tried, but I tried one brand 1 month, another brand the next month. And after just 2 months, I was over it. It completely changed me as a person. I was so irritable, so moody. My mom was over it too, for sure. So I just decided to get off. And I didn't know any other options though. And it wasn't really messing with my quality of life. It was just like, man, I can't, I don't know when my period is coming. But so I didn't really do anything more for it. When I was 18, so about 2 years later, I was really involved at my church youth group at the time. And there was a talk about fertility. And the woman that was giving the talk was really talking about natural family planning, and the Catholic Church is teaching on natural family planning. It was really the first time that I had learned this. I didn't grow up knowing a whole lot about it, but she said something else that really struck me. And she said, this is not just for family planning though. There's so much more that can be done with a fertility chart on a medical level. And I am from Phoenix, Arizona. And in Phoenix, we have an amazing clinic here that actually works with women by not putting them on the pill, but teaching them how to chart their cycle, specifically with the Creighton method, and working from there to really figure out the root issue that's causing the unwanted symptom and then seeking treatment from there. So she was talking about this and I like felt in my bones. I'm like, this is something new and something that could actually help me. So I ended up picking her brain like crazy after her talk, and she led me to that clinic.
Oh, Haley, this is an incredible beginning to this interview because I can imagine so many young women, many women in their 20s, listen to our podcast, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the one thing that I want to encourage all young women to do is to do what Haley did. I mean, she didn't feel right. I think so on the birth control pill. I think so many women just think, well, this is just, I have to put up with it. I have to figure out a way to live with this. I'm going to work around this thing, even though internally they may realize and know that this is not at all what they want, but they just feel like they have to settle. So first off, Haley, I want to say such wisdom in a 16-year-old young woman. Praise the Lord. And again, your mom was over it too, so I'm sure it helped. It's not like she was arguing with you to stay on it.
Sure.
And how beautiful too it took for you to hear, like you had ears to hear, ears for listening to another way. And we're going to learn more about your story, but that's just it. When we learn the truth about the goodness of our body, and when we learn about the truth that there are ways to get to the root cause of some of these issues. I always say, ladies, you are worth getting to the root cause for. We're worthy of restoration. We don't have to suffer. We were not made to suffer in this way. There are answers. So we're in the story now, Haley, where you're at an intro session, right? And you're listening to this Creighton lady.
So it wasn't an intro session necessarily. It was one of like the core members, one of the leaders of youth group. And she was just giving, it wasn't Creighton specific, but it was just a very broad overview for us teenagers about natural family planning. And it was specifically because it was in youth group setting, it was specifically about the church's teaching on natural family planning, but she also had the wisdom to bring in there, okay, this isn't just for family planning, though. There's so much more that this can offer on a medical level. And that's really when my ears turned on and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, here is my other option. Because beforehand, I didn't feel like I had another option, which is exactly why I didn't pursue anything else. Right. But finally, I was like, oh, okay, this is something. So
got it. So then, excuse me, after then that session, how did you come to learn about Creighton? How did you get connected with somebody to teach you this natural system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I remember going home from that talk and telling my mom all about it. And I was like, you know what? I just feel like there is another option. Now, when I talked to the woman who gave the talk, I picked her brain afterwards. She told me about this specific clinic in my area. And so I went home, told my mom about it. And my mom was like, oh, okay, well, let's just go see our own doctor again and just see what other options she has that's not the pill. And I was like, okay, we can start there. So before going to that clinic, I went to just my regular PCP and I said, at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm still having these irregular cycles, but I don't want the pill. And I knew enough, probably because of this talk that I had just heard, I knew enough to know that when you have an irregular cycle, when your period isn't coming regularly, it's because you're not ovulating regularly. And so, but that was the extent of my knowledge. And so when I remember going back to my regular doctor saying, hey, I'm still having these irregular cycles, but I don't want the pill. Is there another thing that you can give me? And she was super kind. And also too, this is a doctor who is a doctor. She's been to years and years of medical school, residency, training. This is a smart woman. And I remember her asking me, she's like, okay, if you don't mind me asking, why don't you want the pill? And I said, well, my body isn't ovulating. Like I know that at this point, or if I am ovulating, it's not happening regularly. And the pill is not going to help me do that. It's actually the main thing the pill stops. And so I'm like, so I don't feel like that's treating the issue that I'm experiencing. And I remember her saying, and again, doctor, smart woman. I remember her looking at me and being like, well, why do you want to ovulate? And that it made me stop in my tracks. And I'm like, okay, this is where our meeting ends because we're just not on the same page. And I feel like this is such a common mindset though for medical professionals. And I don't know from all of the conversations I've had with people who are in med school or they've graduated med school and they're learning though about fertility awareness based methods, NFP. This is the thing I hear all the time is this is not taught in med school. We are taught the pill and that is about it. So I can't blame her. Like this is what she was taught, but I wanted something different. So I ended up going then to that other clinic in my area that the speaker was talking about. And immediately they had me starting to learn how to chart Creighton. So to answer your question, long story short, that is where I learned the Creighton method, and Creighton specifically just because we know it is a more medical method and it ties in with NAPRO technology or natural procreative technology. So that was the reason I learned that method specifically. And I also want to mention too that I was like 19 years old. I'm not sexually active. I'm not married. I'm not trying to have a baby anytime soon. I just want to be healthy. And I find, and this is where my passion for teaching single women comes into play. Like I do teach couples, married couples, engaged couples, and I find that's wonderful and great and beautiful that they're learning. But I really love to convince single women to do this now before they are married, because if you can get a handle on your fertility now, it is a gift to your husband. It's a gift to your future husband that you may not even know yet. But that was really where things took off for me there.
Yeah, you're so well spoken in this. And I just did a talk for college girls, and I just want to be like, man, they need you. Every girl in high school and college needs to hear this story because it will resonate so much with young women. And also, again, you had the wisdom to be like, wait a second, this doesn't seem right. And a lot of people ask, Teresa, why do doctors prescribe the pill so much? That question comes up a lot. And you kind of feel bad saying something like, well, they just don't know, because again, doctors are supposed to know, but they don't. In fact, I just gave a talk at a physician assistants conference, and it was about perimenopause and menopause, but I stopped for a moment and I said, listen, guys, because I'm talking about hormones and I'm talking about the changes of perimenopause. I'm like, if you cannot in your brain draw out and really see the menstrual cycle, if you can't understand exactly what the main event is and what the hormonal changes are that occur with the main event, which is not your period, then we have a problem. Like we can't have this conversation until you actually understand deeply as a medical professional what happens in the female body. And I even stopped and asked a question. Okay, listen, guys, when you don't ovulate, what is the hormone that goes missing? And there was just dead silence. Okay, someone's got to know it. When you don't ovulate, what's the hormone that goes missing? These are medical professionals. And someone slowly raised their hand. Is it LH? Nope, that's not it. Another person in the room raised their hand. Is it FSH? No, that's not it. And it was like, and this is like a group of 60, 70 medical professionals. They didn't know the hormone that goes missing when you don't ovulate. Okay, just so if anyone's wondering what that answer is, it is progesterone. You only make the hormone progesterone when you ovulate. And this is a huge issue with people who have irregular cycles, right? Because you're not balanced, right? There's supposed to be a balance between our reproductive hormones. So this is why, because what they learn is they might learn a very, very brief overview of the menstrual cycle and the reproductive anatomy and the diseases. It's mostly focused on the diseases that come with that. But when they get to the solution or, how to treat that, what they're told is that it's just best to suppress the ovaries because the ovaries aren't working right, right? So for now, let's just suppress it. And somehow that will balance, not really, but balance your cycles or give you a regular cycle, but it's not regular at all. And so that's what happens to woman after woman after woman. And, after I gave the talk to the college kids just a night or two ago, I had 3 or 4 women that came up to me that were on the pill and they were like, yeah, not sexually active, single women, just had been put on the pill for some sort of disturbance in their menstrual cycle. And after realizing after my talk, wait, that doesn't really do anything. That doesn't really regulate anything. They're like, I would like to get off. And then they ask the question, how do I do that? Then that's the big question is it's kind of scary. Do I just stop this medication? Anyway, so that your story resonates with everyone. So obviously, like, I'm sure people are curious. You had irregular cycles, one of the most common problems in a young female. And so eventually, hopefully you got a diagnosis. So how did that happen?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm hearing you talk, Teresa, and I'm just getting so pumped in my bones because I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And honestly, my goal in life, and I'm nowhere near this yet, but my goal in life is really to teach medical people this because I think if we can get what is the root of this, the root of why so many women are put on the pill is because they are being prescribed the pill. And so if we can go to the doctors and say, hey, there's another option for this and really teach them at the root, then they can give such a better option for their patients, which is exactly why I was at that PAX conference where I met you, Teresa. So, but you're exactly right. I did get a diagnosis of polycystic ovarian syndrome, which you probably both guessed, because when you have irregular cycles, that's kind of the usual culprit. But the way that I was diagnosed with that is they had me start charting. They did ultrasound. They did blood work. They actually went through and took the time to diagnose me. Had I never gone on the pill or gotten off the pill, excuse me, I never had that diagnosis beforehand. I never had blood work. I never had an ultrasound. There was no questions asked beforehand of, okay, let's actually investigate as to why you're having these irregular cycles. There was none of that. It was just, okay, here's the pill. That's just what you do. So
I want to say one thing.
Yes,
I just want to say one thing, Haley.
right.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to reiterate just this container that we're in right now. So you went to the doctor when you're a teenager. Why do you want to ovulate anyway? That was the question. Like, why is this important to you? Okay. As opposed to the direct polarization of how we treat women in this space is that is the primary marker. It's not even like, oh, why do you want to ovulate? It's the one thing that we're charting our cycle for to understand more about. Because like Teresa says all the time, ovulation is our main event. How is it that doctors see it as a non-event when it is the main event? So with you, Haley, getting diagnosed with PCOS, I'm sure first off, you were angry and frustrated that it took you this long, and you're not the only woman who just waits forever to get the proper diagnosis. Number two, you're probably like, well, what now? So tell us about what was going on in your mind when you finally got that diagnosis, and then tell us what happened after that. How did you kind of work to restore your health and fertility?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you said you were probably angry because to me, I don't remember being super angry about it. I just remember being like, oh my gosh, just more so hope. Like, oh my gosh, there's an answer. Because God made me a fixer. If there's a problem, I just want to fix it. And I was just elated that I had an answer and a way to fix this. I think I would have been more angry if I had stayed on the pill for 10 years, met my husband, got married, got off the pill to have babies, and then couldn't. I think that would have caused a lot more anger in me. And unfortunately, that is this more of a common story that I hear, which is heartbreaking. which is again the reason why I love teaching single women, because especially too when you're teaching a woman who is not necessarily concerned about family planning because she's single. It feels like she has more just time to be able to be on this journey, rather than if it's a couple that's struggling with infertility. That is a heartbreaking thing already. And then going on this journey can be even more difficult. And my heart goes out. I work with a lot of women and couples that are in that spot too. And so my heart just goes out to them. And this is exactly why I'm so blessed to have learned this as a single woman, but also why I love teaching single women this, because it truly is a gift that you can give to your husband in your future marriage. But so I got my diagnosis with PCOS, and it was quite a journey of figuring out, for me at least, what to heal, what would be the best treatment solution for that. My body didn't really respond well to any of the medications that I was being prescribed. Metformin is a pretty common one. And I just felt like every time I was going to the doctor, they were upping my metformin. And I was just taking medicine after medicine after medicine, which for some women, like I'm actually thinking of a friend of mine right now, also has PCOS. Metformin does wonders for her. She has 6 beautiful children, and that works for her. My body just did not respond to it very well. And I'm sure you guys have thoughts about that too, because I know with your hormones and now I feel like people are getting a more natural mindset about things and really want to focus on, okay, how can we change your diet? How can we change your lifestyle? How can we change those things to really, really heal? And so that ultimately is what I ended up doing. Now it's funny though, because I was 19, 20, 21 at the time, as I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I ovulate again? And I'm in college. What college student wants to start eating fresh broccoli? Like, no thanks, But finally, I got to the point where I'm like, I need to change my diet, because my doctor continued to tell me, you probably need to change your diet. You probably need to change your diet. You probably need to change your diet. And I'm like, well, no, let's just figure out what medications can help me first before I need to do that. But finally, I ended up just biting the bullet, and I was like, oh, okay, I probably need to change my diet. So I did. And this was also too, I met my husband when I was 20, and we got married at 21. So I got married fairly young. But my husband also grew up in a family. His mother is an amazing cook, and she eats very healthy. So I learned a lot about healthy eating and healthy cooking from my husband and his mom specifically. But that was what moved the needle for me. I actually saw, and what's really cool too is that when you're charting your cycle, you can see the actual effect that those changes are having on your body. You guys, I started ovulating when I stopped. I really just cut out a lot of sugar and a lot of carbs. And that for me moved the needle. And it was that was the game changer.
This is such an important topic, for us to understand the relationship between nutrition, food, our fertility. I think about what are the main things during the day that could assault us in regards to our health. We often try to make sure we have toxic-free household cleaners and maybe clean shampoos and personal care products. But what are the things that we do every day, multiple times a day? Well, hopefully we're drinking water. So we want to make sure we have healthy drinking water, and we also eat food. We do these 2 things probably more than any other times. We don't wash our face 5 times a day, but we may be putting food in our mouth 5 times a day. So I always think about that. But this is just kind of a perfect time too for me to introduce and to share again with our listeners, our podcast partner who we love is called We Heart Nutrition. And so again, eating healthy foods, most definitely drinking good, clean water, making sure our home, as much as we can, has reduced toxic load, but also having a really high quality supplement is so important. You can get supplements anywhere. You can go to Walmart, go to Walgreens, get supplements over the counter. You don't really know what you're taking. You really, really, really want to know what quality of supplements you're taking. So again, Therese and I, we love We Heart Nutrition. They stand for a great cause, and our listeners get 20% off of their first order if they order anything from We Heart Nutrition with the code Genius. So again, especially I love the magnesium glycinate and the wholesome balance, and the omegas. Those are awesome supplements. We take them every day, and I even have my 12-year-old daughter taking these. So anyway, I just wanted to say that quick. But Haley, tell us a little bit. You said, broccoli. You used that as an example, and that's a perfect example for maybe a vegetable that people don't want to eat. But what are some ways that you started incorporating healthy foods into your daily nutrition and your meals? And what have been ways that maybe has expanded into something that you enjoy? Or, how do you make eating healthy more fun and doable, especially for young women your age? It's hard, like in college, to get what you need. So um, how did you find healthy eating helping you? And then also, what were some strategies you learned?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I remember where I was living at the time. I was living with five other women. We were all Newman Center girls from we all went to Arizona State University. And so we were all friends living all together in this little townhouse. And the girl I was rooming or was sharing a room with, my best friend, maid of honor, my wedding, beautiful human being, she was also really wanting to eat healthy too. And so I think the main thing is finding community of healthy eaters or finding somebody to do it with you. Because when everybody around you is eating cookies and bread and just all the things we probably shouldn't be eating regularly, maybe sparingly or in moderation. But if everybody around you is eating poorly, it's going to be that much harder to actually make that change. But when you have somebody that is going on the journey with you, or if it's your husband, this is around the time that like I said, I met my husband. We weren't married yet, but he also was wanting to eat healthy and was very supportive. He knew that I had told him fairly early on my whole story, and he was so, so supportive in wanting to help me with it. So finding people to do that with you, I think, is really helpful. But it really just started out by cooking and rather than just going out or getting ready-made meals or things like that. It was actually, let's go buy raw chicken at the store and season it ourselves and cook it. That is just like, that is where it starts, is just cooking for yourself. And I'm trying to remember at the time what like the exact things that I did for. I know my husband taught me a lot. My husband honestly is the one who taught me how to cook. So we were just doing it together. We were eating just things. You would buy things at the store that were not ready made. I think that is a very good starting point, because we can get so far into like organic, non-processed. Let's look at the ingredients. Let's look at all of that. And all of that is good. But I think if you're just starting out completely clueless about any of that, like what ingredients to look for, just start cooking from scratch. Just start buying raw chicken at the store. Put some salt and garlic powder on it and you're good to go. Throw it in the oven. I think that's a really good place to start. And then seasoning vegetables. I never serve my family broccoli if it doesn't have olive oil, balsamic, and tons of seasoning to make it actually taste good. And now it was hard at first. It's a change like that is always going to be difficult, which is exactly why people just want to find a medicine to help them. This is the harder thing to do. But I think once you get into that routine of learning how to cook, and then you don't have to find a recipe for everything, and you just kind of just kind of get into your own rotation of things, it becomes a lot easier and a lot more just part of what you do.
I used to think that, so in my early years, I think you said I was listening to one of your podcasts, Haley, and I think you said you were like a sugarholic maybe at some point, and I was totally too. And then I got married, and then I was like, oh, when you have other people that you're feeding, you're like, well, I should feed them healthy food. So it's a little bit more helpful. So I used to think broccoli like cancels out everything bad. So if I serve my kids chicken nuggets, it really didn't matter. As long as broccoli was with it, it canceled out any negativity or if you're serving cake, just as long as they ate broccoli before. Like that's the way I view broccoli. It's like canceller of all other bad foods. And I still,
Yeah.
to this day, like it's still one of my favorite, foods to continually put on. But my husband and I are in a war right now about which vegetable should be served at our dinners. He is a total pea guy, peas. And like, I mean, really? Peas? I mean, awful, right? And like, I've always been a broccoli girl. And I don't know. We're in a war right now between peas and broccoli, but that's a whole nother story.
So
Um,
funny.
but Haley, because I want people to understand a little bit about PCOS, I want, maybe in your own words, because people won't be able to see you right now, but if you look up PCOS and you look up the symptoms, a lot of times there's a classic version of PCOS, right? It might be somebody with irregular cycles, but they also have, they're overweight or obese. They might have a lot of acne and hair growth. That's the classic version. Now, maybe you had some of those things, but you don't obviously now, just looking at you. But there is another version, or there's an umbrella of PCOS that, you might not get the diagnosis correctly because someone looks at you and there's like, oh, you can't have PCOS. You're thin, you don't have any acne and whatnot. So just in your own words, explain what PCOS is and kind of what you know about the diagnosis and, give us a rundown of polycystic ovarian syndrome in your own words.
Yeah. So the reason I was even diagnosed, you're right. I've never really looked like the typical PCOS patient, but now learning more and more throughout my journey of this, I've learned that there's three main kind of markers that doctors are looking for to actually diagnose PCOS, which I'm sure both of you know already, but hyperandrogenism, right? So having those symptoms of like abnormal hair growth and acne and things like that, having an irregular cycle, and then actually having cysts on your ovaries. This is exactly why to properly diagnose PCOS, you need blood work and you need an ultrasound. And it is bonkers to me how many women say that I even see now as a fertility educator. They tell me, well, I think I have PCOS. My doctor said I probably do, but I haven't really done any like, and then my first question is, have you had an ultrasound? Usually, no. Have you had blood work? Yeah. Okay. When did you have your blood work done? What did they test? There's so many details of this that mainstream physicians are not usually looking at, but I had irregular cycles, like I already mentioned. I had the hyperandrogenism. I did have a little bit of that abnormal hair growth. You know what? Thank you, Lord, for tweezers. um, but when I did the ultrasound, the typical PCOS patient on their ultrasound, their ovary looks like a string of pearls. It just looks like these little tiny dots in her ovary and what those are immature follicles or immature eggs, right? That have not yet that haven't gotten to the maturation stage where they could be ovulated. And so I pretty much had all three of those things, which is why I was able to be properly diagnosed with PCOS. And the reason that proper diagnosis is so important is because that leads then to proper treatment, right? So I did have all of those signs and symptoms, even though just kind of, because some people you just look at them and you're like, I know exactly what you have. Other people you do have to do some more investigation with it, but I have learned a lot since then just about polycystic ovarian syndrome. I've also learned since then that 50% of PCOS patients also have endometriosis, and so that is also another huge thing for me. I don't suspect that I do have endometriosis. I've never had the diagnostic surgery to rule that out necessarily, but when I got my diagnosis of at least PCOS at 19, 20 years old, went on this whole journey of eating healthy. And Teresa, I actually have a side note really quick, kale chips, just to kind of throw that in there. I will rip the lettuce not the lettuce, but rip the kale off of the stem, put it on a pan, olive oil and balsamic, salt and pepper, put it in the oven at 400 for 10 minutes, and you have really good tasting kale chips. Whenever we have burgers at our house, that's our side. So just to throw that in there.
Oh, that's great. Put that on a burger. That's a great idea.
We don't usually put it on our, it's just
Oh,
like instead of having fries, we have kale chips. And that's
oh,
just, and my kids are totally good with it because they don't know anything different.
I'm totally gonna put it on my burger though next time because
Oh,
that
that's
sounds so
actually a good
good.
idea. Yeah, give it that little crunch. Yeah, so good. Anyways, total side tangent, but I wanted to throw that in there for an option other than peas and broccoli. But
Yeah, you'll win, Teresa, with that
there you
tip. Just
go.
bring in
There
the
you go.
kale. Bring
If
in the
you get
kale.
anything from this.
Yeah. Haley, I have a question for you
Yes,
here,
yeah.
real quick. So, because you were charting, so you did learn creatine, right? So that you could get the proper diagnosis, which is
Yeah.
something that's important for people to know is that, if they want to see a NAPRO doctor, most of the time that NAPRO doctor, well, 100% of the time they're going to want that woman to chart. Most of the time they're going to want them to chart with creatine so that they can get a really good, proper sense of when that main event is, when they should be doing blood work. It's really important. But when women chart and they have PCOS, I know in my experience as a fertility care practitioner, there were sometimes I could tell charting patterns even if I was closing my eyes and I didn't know what that woman looked like. And again, not always do women present in that way as we're talking about. Just even seeing a chart and hearing the symptoms, sometimes we can just kind of deduce what may be going on. Of course, the doctor diagnoses them. Haley, in your experience, what were some of these charting patterns that you see in clients you work with? But then also, what were the charting patterns in you? Did it look totally normal? Which it could. Sometimes I see that. Sometimes it doesn't. So Haley, tell me about what your charting looked like.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right. Some women that I work with who do have PCOS have completely normal looking charts, and it's kind of interesting how that can happen. But for me, well, first of all, cycle length for me, I have my typical cycles range anywhere from 40 to 60 days. So definitely on the long end of things, but my cycle or my chart, excuse me, looked like a whole lot of cervical mucus, kind of all over the place with not really a whole lot of rhyme or reason to it, which is a pretty typical thing to see with PCOS. Also, I was having a lot of unusual bleeding. So a lot of women who don't know really or have never charted their cycle and don't really know the science behind the hormones of their period. A lot of women with PCOS say, I have a period like every 2 weeks. Okay, let's take a step back for a second. That's probably not what's going on. Let's start charting and let's see what actually is happening, because a true period only follows ovulation. And if ovulation isn't happening, then you're probably not having a true period. And so for me, that's exactly what was happening. I was having these irregular spells of bleeding. Sometimes it would come within 2 weeks. Sometimes it would be a couple months before I had bleeding again, but a lot of brown bleeding too. That's another big thing that we see with PCOS patients. But for me, yeah, it was unusual bleeding just because, especially with PCOS, oftentimes the woman is having an estrogen dominance kind of effect in her body. So her estrogen is kind of overtaking things, which when estrogen is so high, your uterine lining is so thick that the body can't sustain it anymore. And so you just have that natural spotting that's occurring because just of the instability of that uterine lining, which is normally shed with your period after ovulation. But if you're not ovulating regularly and your body isn't regularly able to slough off that uterine lining, then your body oftentimes it just can't hold on to it any longer. And so that's what's causing this, one of the things at least that's causing this unusual bleeding. So I was having unusual bleeding, brown bleeding, very long cycles, and just kind of mucus all over the place. Now, when I really started learning though about when I was charting my cycle, my practitioner that was teaching me how to chart was also helping me figure out the different types of cervical mucus that I was seeing, which is so important. And now something that I help a lot of women with, because especially when you have long or irregular cycles, for whatever reason it is, oftentimes women do have this kind of crazy pattern of mucus. But most times, the mucus that your body is producing around the time of true ovulation, when your body is truly revving up for ovulation, that mucus is going to look significantly different than I kind of call it like the background noise mucus, or just like the mucus that's there for no apparent rhyme or reason. And so I learned how to do this myself, and then now as an instructor, I teach other women really how to look at the difference between the mucus your body is just kind of the same old stuff that you're seeing day by day by day, versus when you are ovulating, there is a very distinct change that's occurring there. And that is how you can pinpoint the time of ovulation, even when you're having irregular or long cycles. And for me, especially, really the one of the biggest blessings of it is that even though I was having an irregular cycle, if I was able to pinpoint when I was truly ovulating, I knew that my period was going to come about 2 weeks later, because of that post-ovulation period is a lot more stable. Even when you have PCOS, that post-ovulatory period is going to be much more stable. So for me, I actually knew when my period was coming for the first time ever, even though my cycles were still irregular, because I could pinpoint the time of ovulation just based on the change of mucus that I was experiencing right around that time.
It's a really good point to bring up the mucus, because I know a lot of people, when we teach about cervical mucus, oftentimes I think what's going on in girls' brains or young women's minds is, I have mucus all the time. And so they're telling me that I'm supposed to have mucus only when I ovulate. And so they're confused by the fact that their body maybe isn't doing what, again, we're telling them is normal. So it is normal sometimes to have background mucus in a sense, or some what I call your everyday mucus, comparatively to the mucus that happens when you make high estrogen levels associated with ovulation. That's completely different. So that's very helpful with charting. But I have two questions for you, Haley, in regards to that. One, a lot of people, in terms of ease and technology, want to use the LH strips. So the LH strips are the, urinary monitors like Clear Blue, Mira. And so I want you to explain maybe to the listeners why sometimes it's difficult to use the fertility monitors as easily, at least, with PCOS. And then after you explain that, because that's, I think, a common question, a lot of patients are like, oh, I'm using the monitor. Maybe they know they have PCOS, maybe they don't, but they're like, it's not working for me. So explain why that maybe is harder for women with PCOS to use. But also then after you answer that, I want people to know, what are the other things besides just nutrition that maybe helped you restore from your PCOS, or what you would consider healing PCOS from that aspect of the condition?
Absolutely. Well, cervical mucus, I mean, across the board, really across almost all fertility charting methods, that is one of the main things that's being observed, which is a very important thing to be looking at, because of that common change, right? Our cervical mucus is a direct reflection of our hormones. And so that's why it's such a reliable source, really, to be able to see what's going on in our bodies. I'm really glad you brought up LH strips, Teresa, because with LH strips, I don't have anything. If you're using Marquette and you're using the LH strips, that's great. If it's working for you, wonderful. For me, it would not work. Using the LH strips alone, I should say, for me would not necessarily be super reliable, because with PCOS patients, when you have that irregular long cycles, you can actually have multiple LH spikes before your true one that is sparking on ovulation. And so you can kind of when you're measuring the hormone, that's great, but it doesn't necessarily measure the exact thing that's actually happening, because we have to make sure that, first of all, that the hormone is acting in the way that it should, that it's rising and falling when it should be, but also that the hormone is doing its job to actually do what it's supposed to be doing when it rises, right? So when LH rises, that's supposed to lead into ovulation. Well, when you have, at least with PCOS, I know, when you have PCOS and you have those long cycles, you can have multiple LH spikes before you actually have ovulation occurring. So if you're using the LH strips, you could be thinking, oh, okay, I'm ovulating now because my LH strip says my LH is high. Well, your LH could definitely be high, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually sparking ovulation. So I don't usually recommend LH strips, at least for when you have long irregular cycles, because of that phenomenon that can happen. The other thing too is fertility apps. I could go on a whole rant about this too, so I'll spare you of that. But I'm all about, if you want to use an app to put your information into, but you yourself are using your brain to figure out when you are fertile or infertile. Okay, great. But if you are relying on the app to tell you when you are fertile or infertile, that's when we get into, I'm not sure if that's the best idea, because when you have PCOS and you have irregular cycles, your app is going to tell you it's going to be wrong. It just hands down, it's going to be wrong, because your app is actually using the calendar rhythm method, which, if we think about the calendar rhythm method as this is the reason why so many people think NFP doesn't work. Yeah, it wasn't as reliable when we used the calendar rhythm method, because not all women have a perfect 30-day cycle. Okay, so why are we putting our potential parenthood in the hands of an app that uses the calendar rhythm method? Yeah, we could go there. But so there's a lot of different like techie things around fertility that understandably women like to use. This is our culture now. We use our phones nonstop. We rely on technology nonstop. And whether that's a bad or a good thing, I just think that when you are looking at for your true fertile window, or if you're trying to figure out what is going on with my body, why am I having these irregular cycles, relying on this technology to help us, it can be very misleading. Now, one thing that's different with the Creighton method, but that I personally still really love, is taking my temperature. That would be more on the symptothermal side of things, another natural family planning method. I actually also am a symptothermal instructor. I actually became a symptothermal instructor first before I became a Creighton instructor, just because of the reality of that was more available to me at the time when I wanted to start teaching this. So I became a symptothermal instructor, and something that I absolutely love with symptothermal is that your temperature. So just to kind of give a little bit of an explanation for your listeners who don't necessarily know, when you're using the symptothermal method of natural family planning and charting your cycle that way by taking your temperature, you're taking your temperature every morning at the same time. So usually just when you wake up, consistently at the same time, you're popping that thermometer in your mouth, you're taking your temperature, you're plotting it on a chart. Progesterone is a thermogenic hormone, so it causes your temperature to rise. And as you mentioned at the very beginning of this interview, Teresa, progesterone only rises after ovulation. So when you're taking your temperature, if you start to see your temperature rise, that is a very good indication that ovulation or some sort of ovulatory event, right, has happened. And so for me, because I was not ovulating regularly, and even still with getting on this journey of different medications, different diets and stuff, I never got to the point where I had a regular cycle anymore, but I got to the point where I was ovulating. And that for me was a huge feat in and of itself. So when I was taking my temperature, I was still able to be extra confident that when ovulation happened, because like we already mentioned with PCOS, you can have mucus that's kind of coming and going, coming and going and coming and going. And you could have these, what we'd call like false peaks, right? Until you actually have the mucus that is leading into true ovulation. So for me, taking my temperature was a really helpful thing that when I saw that temperature rise, I knew, okay, I've ovulated or I've had some sort of ovulatory event, right? So that was a really big confidence booster for me with a cross check method. So when you're looking at cervical mucus, but then adding in another thing. So temperature, I just have a love for taking your temperature because of that. Now the Creighton method, that's not included in the Creighton method, and you can absolutely use the method just with cervical mucus and get the same result. And that's great. For me, though, I really just liked having that cross check. And I also just think because I started teaching the symptothermal method, I do have a love for it as well. But with Creighton, only looking at cervical mucus, that is really the only thing that we need. When you have a cross check method, that's really helpful to help your own confidence of knowing your fertility and where you're at in your cycle. And that's what was helpful really for me with the temperature. But you really truly can just rely on that cervical mucus because it is such a direct reflection of your hormones.
Totally. Did you know, Teresa, I don't know if you know this, but I was a symptothermal method instructor to start too. And yeah, it's just something that's just beautiful. Our body tells us in so many ways when we're fertile and infertile. And you know what? We don't even know all of them yet. In like 10 years, there'll be like 20 more things that we'll come to realize that we can actually observe or notice just based on when we've ovulated. But Haley, so we talked a little bit about your story. We talked about what PCOS is. We talked about charting, and we talked about Creighton, and we talked about LH strips. We talked about a lot of things. But here, as we're closing up, what would be like 3 or however many things you just want to share with our listeners about if they have PCOS? These are like the top 3 things to pursue if they're trying to enhance their health. So we talked a little bit about nutrition, but to end, what would you say is a good sum up of, again, high level 3 things that could enhance their health if they struggle with PCOS?
Yeah. I the first thing that comes to mind is to find a doctor that can help you walk this journey, that won't give you the birth control pill, that has another option for you. My first go-to is always to find a NAPRO doctor. So the best place to do that is there's a website called fertilitycare.org. I believe it's .org. And they have a directory where you can find different Creighton instructors to teach you how to chart your cycle. I am one of those, so self-plug. But you can also you can find doctors on there as well that are trained in NAPRO technology, that know the science behind, okay, how do we properly diagnose based on the symptoms that you're experiencing, and then finding good treatment from there. So really, and this can be a very hard thing to do because they're kind of few and far between, unfortunately, right now. So finding one in your area can be difficult, but more and more doctors are doing telehealth and they're doing virtual meetings as well. So it is possible. You just have to do the right research. So finding a doctor that's going to be on a more natural bend with actually wanting to diagnose the root cause of why you are experiencing your symptoms, if it be PCOS. Okay. But even if a woman is diagnosed with PCOS, still the mainstream first line of treatment for that is the pill. So even if you have a doctor that's willing to go through the process of diagnosing you, finding one that's actually going to treat it without the pill, since we know that that's just a Band-Aid, that can be hard to find. But there are definitely directories. Another one that I am thinking of, well, Facts About Fertility is another great website to go to they have a directory of doctors that work in the natural, like, fertility awareness method world. Naturalwomanhood.com is another really good one. So finding a doctor to walk you through this and actually kind of take your hand and lead you through this is going to be really helpful. I think also just having a healthy lifestyle, really changing your diet, starting to work out. I love Pilates. That is like my go-to. So I do Pilates regularly, and just moving your body, having a healthy lifestyle. That's not the easy fix. It's not. No one charting your cycle is not the easy thing to do. Whenever I'm teaching somebody, I always mention, I'm not teaching this to you because it's easy. Giving you a pill would be so much easier, but it is such a better option when you're learning to chart your cycle. You yourself are taking your fertility into your own hands. You can see exactly how that workout and how that broccoli on the side of your nuggets are are actually affecting your cycle, right? Eating healthier, working out, moving your body, that in and of itself, whether you have PCOS or not, is always going to be good. And I also think too, just remembering that this journey, as long and as difficult as it may be for some people, it is completely 100% hands down worth it. And I say this because I am now, at this point, I am 6 years into marriage. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 9-month-old. And all three of which were planned. We've used the NFP in order to achieve pregnancy because of the fact that I don't ovulate as often as the typical woman. My husband and I are always charting to look for when I am ovulating so that we can achieve pregnancy. And I have been able to have my 3 beautiful children because of this journey. Something that the Lord has been really working on my heart with is remembering that every single thing that we have is a gift. And so this is it's something that's coming up in my prayer over and over and over again, that everything, my children, my husband, my house, my everything I have, my family, everything I have is a gift that was given to me by the Lord. And this whole journey that I've taken the time to tell you guys about is a gift to myself, because I was able to seek healing for myself. I was able to learn so much more about my body, become empowered by that knowledge. But I also think too, especially for those single women out there, and even if you're married as well, this is a gift that you're giving to your husband. Because hands down, had I not gone through this journey as a single woman the way that I did, I truly believe that my husband and I would have probably had a story of infertility instead, which means that I would not have the 3 children that I have today, which is really bone shaking to me. Like, you guys both know, you both have children. Like, the children that you have are irreplaceable. They're beautiful, unique, amazing human beings. And to think of them not being on this world is, you can't even imagine it. And so just recognizing the fact that this journey that I went through as a single woman was for the sake of giving my children life, and opening my body and opening my husband's and mine fertility to receive those gifts, is just that in and of itself is just that right there is the reason to go on this journey, is to give this gift of a healthy fertility to yourself, to your husband, and to your future family, or for your current family. So I think that's 3 things that I would recommend.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm gonna ask this last question here, which I ask all of our interviewees. If you were to sum it up, what do you wish every woman knew about her hormone genius?
Yes. I was asked this not this specific question, but I was asked a question recently, like, what is the main reason that you do what you do? Why do you want to teach women how to chart their cycles? I have a huge passion for getting women off the pill. I want them to know that there is such a better option available. And that the pill is it's just a Band-Aid. It sometimes does a really good job at alleviating the symptoms that you're experiencing, but it's not getting to the root cause of what is happening. And so I think with your Hormone Genius, learning your body, learning the hormones that should have a natural ebb and flow to them throughout the cycle, and working with a doctor to actually get to the point where that natural ebb and flow is happening and you are ovulating, which means you are then having a typical period. I think, yeah, that is the education that I want to give all women, is why it's important that you're ovulating, especially on a regular basis, hopefully. And then why the pill is not the best option and why there is a better option.
Well, I know if I was a young woman listening, Haley, I'd want to sign up and chart with you. I mean, you're a cool chick. Let's put it that way.
Well, thanks.
It seems like you'd be like an awesome person to work with charting. So tell us about like how people can learn about charting with you, learning how to chart, and also about your podcast that you have recently launched. I think it's fairly new, but
yes. Yeah.
I've already listened. It's great. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah. So because of this, the Lord has put a passion in my heart for this because of my story. And so I did end up becoming a Creighton instructor because I wanted to work more in the medical space, in the medical realm. I actually do work that clinic that I went to that diagnosed me with PCOS. I now work there 1 day a week as their on-site Creighton instructor. But then I do offer virtual Creighton instruction through my own website. So if you go to truthandfertility.com, that's where you can find all about me and what I offer. And so I just offer the typical Creighton instruction for women and couples. So whether it's a single woman that wants to kind of take charge of her health, whether it's a couple that wants to get pregnant or wants to avoid pregnancy, I see all of them. So again, truthandfertility.com. And because it's virtual, I can see anybody across the country. So I'm in Arizona, but that doesn't mean you have to be in Arizona to work with me. So so that's where you can find more information about that. I do have my podcast as well, which is the Truth and Fertility podcast. Still fairly new, but I am starting to do a lot more interviews because my knowledge is limited, and it's also cool too because I'm realizing I have so many friends that are so incredibly smart about so many different topics that are surrounding this whole fertility space. So I'm starting to do a lot more interviews too, which has been really fun, even just for me to learn more. So so again, Truth and Fertility podcast, you can find that on Spotify, Apple, or Amazon.
Well, thank you, Haley. It's been a delight to have you, and we will talk to you again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel, so if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.